with the administration duties. So I think we're covered, and I think that's all I have to say.
Ron, do you think it would be beneficial, like Matt had spoke about, maybe putting this on the agenda, we can discuss a little bit further?
Well, any change to the Water Master Administration is going to take 5 votes. This was something, again, this was in closed session, so not a lot I can say about closed session, but any change is going to take 5 votes. And as chairman of this board for many years, I've worked really hard to get consensus. When we hired the administrators, it was hard to get a consensus. It went on for many months. And at this point, I don't know what the pleasure of the Avek board will be, but I think we just go forward with the process.
I would like to, sir.
0. Yeah, we've looked at that before. When they built the Walmart on 10th Street years ago, they paved over several of our valves. We did the same thing. We tried to go after the contractor, tried to go after Public Works, and they all are just like, sorry, it's part of the deal. So anyway, yeah, it's unfortunate.
And if it's been this way since the 80s, how come we have to do it now?
Well, we've been neglecting, we've been trying to avoid doing it because that is a busy intersection, traffic control, and how are we going to do it without keeping customers, without having customers be out of water?
Right.
So this is a quick way to do it. My philosophy is, when I leave, and this is not just my philosophy, this is really operations philosophy. We do not want to leave ticking time bombs for the people to come after us. When we see things that are broken, the public expects them to be fixed. And we've been remiss for not bringing it to the board sooner, but now we have a way to do it, and we think it's just the right thing to do to be able to isolate things so the future operations people will have a facility they know works.
I have a question.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
In committee, you mentioned this, and today you mentioned permanent. So do you expect this to last 45 years or something?
I don't see why it wouldn't, Audrey. It's effectively, it's new technology, but it works the same as a butterfly, as a gate valve or a butterfly valve. So I don't see why it wouldn't. It's made by Mueller, which is a very reputable company. Yeah, I would expect 40 plus years.
And it's going to save water time with the customers not being out of water for too long.
Yeah, you're right. When we need to isolate the pump station, we just close the valve that works, and we can do our work and turn it back on when we're done.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's also going to save John from getting a 12 midnight call, come out here and fix it.
Yeah, that's an added benefit. You're right.
Okay, I move on board order 8B3 that we approve the $35,960.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Director Donato and Director Miller. Can I make a comment? John, these are very good reports, very thorough. Of course, finance, I don't know what committee it was.
Finance.
We've already went through these, and we hammered them pretty hard, but it was pretty interesting to know because I think California Chateaus is probably, 30 years now? 40?
Gosh.
Probably 40. It was
Yeah.
in the 80s, wasn't it?
I think it was the late 80s for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the decision was made back then, to keep, because that's in the dirt, correct?
Yeah, the blow off is in the dirt, the valve itself is in pavement.
Okay,
But yes.
okay. Thank you. Okay, is there any further questions? Comments?
Check
We have a motion by Director Donato, second by Director Miller. Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, the motion carried.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job, Tom.
Good report. So,
Okay.
go ahead. Okay, Director Donato, does that finish your finance? Okay, we'll move to the next one, High Desert Water Bank. Director Donato is chairman of that, so turn it back to you, Brian. Yeah, we're gonna have Jessica come up our engineering manager of the agency and to give an overview of what progress we have.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Director Donato. Good evening, President Lane and members of the board. Our typical monthly update here, you've seen this many, many times before, but here we go. We always start with our executive summary, identifying the goals of the project, which of course are 280,000 acre feet of total storage inside the project, as well as 70,000 acre feet of capacity for recharge and recovery with the direct pump back to the State Water Project. We went through these key agreement principles, I think the last couple times we did this presentation, but I know there's some new faces in the audience and maybe some online as well, so I'll go through them quickly here. But our agreement with Metropolitan runs through 2037 with an option for them to extend that term by 20 years. Metropolitan agrees to pay all capital costs for the construction of the project, as well as the operation, maintenance, replacement, and management costs for the project. And Avek agrees to own and operate the project. In return for their investment in the project, Metropolitan receives first priority rights to the banking and recovery capacity in the project. In return for operating, owning, maintaining the project, Avek gets second priority right to that banking capacity in the event that Metropolitan chooses not to use it in any given year. Avek also receives a monetary benefit. We get revenue with each acre foot of water returned to the State Water Project for Metropolitan, which started at $100 per acre foot and escalates with CPI. So it's currently about $117 per acre foot. Our project map is on the right-hand side. The blue and orange dots represent the 27 recovery wells envisioned for the project. Blue indicates already drilled wells. Orange indicates future wells. Then we've got our recovery and recharge pipelines shown on the map, as well as the outlines of the recharge basins and shading indicating Tajon Ranch parcels. Short-term goals for the project on the left-hand side of this slide are to ultimately close out the aqueduct turnout contract. Earl's got a brief construction update tonight, but we're working through some of the final negotiations with that project to get closed out. Nicholas Construction will continue working on the recharge basins and pipelines, and they're doing very well on that. Montgomery & Associates is a sub-consultant to Stantec. They've done some groundwater modeling on the project, and they're working on finalizing a modeling report. And then we've got 17 wells left to drill, and so the goal for within the next 3 months would be to issue the next well drilling package for 6 additional wells. Moving into program management, you can see the team of consultants, contractors, and agencies working on the project at the top. Recent program management activity is work primarily being conducted by Kennedy Jenks, serving as Avek's owner's agent for the project. And they just generally track and review the project progress, making sure that our consultants are making their deliverables on time, and reviewing and commenting on any deliverables that we receive, design, modeling, reports, etc. The right-hand side gives you a preview of some upcoming board decisions and actions that will be coming in front of the board at the appropriate time, starting with the issuance of the notice of completion once we're completed with our negotiations and close out with Blois Construction. There's an item for consideration tonight, which is item B, which is to consider authorizing full progress payments for Nicholas Construction. And I've got a few slides on that after this presentation. And then item C is something we've discussed with the High Desert Water Bank Committee, not quite ready for discussion or action by our board tonight, but there will be a change order coming before the board for Nicholas Construction for some modifications of piping at the project. I'm moving into our engineering and field work, and this is work being done by Stantec and their sub-consultant team. So they continue to work with the contractors as they progress during construction, answering any questions or reviewing any submittals provided. I mentioned the groundwater model update, so they're working on preparing that report. One of the conditions of our environmental document, as well as our water master storage agreement, is a groundwater monitoring plan, and they're at work drafting that plan for our review. We should be getting that within the next couple of weeks for our first glance at what that report monitoring plan looks like. And then they're working on updating the well equipping and recovery package, which will be the small diameter piping, pumps, and motors for those wells that are being drilled out there at the project site. So they're making good progress on that. Section 5 is our contracts. Print's a little bit small, and you figure out a way to make that bigger for everyone. But if you squint, you can see the contracts that we've entered into with our various consultants and contractors. The key takeaway on this, because not much changes from month to month, but the thing that I always look at is the percentage of the contract paid, which is on the far right-hand side, which kind of can give you an indication of where we're at in the project versus what we've expended as far as the budget that we've authorized. And everything on this project is tracking very well. On the construction side, we've got Blois at about 95%, so we've got about 5% of retention withheld from their contract. And then Nicholas is making good progress. We've paid about 80% of their contract to date. So they're a little bit over halfway through the actual contract duration. So they're doing very well also. This table summarizes the capital program account activity. So this is the account that we hold that Metropolitan funds, and we make all of our contractor and consultant payments out of. Right now, we've got about $3.9 million in that account. We've got an outstanding invoice to Metropolitan that's due early December for $2.8 million. But in total, Met's deposited $83 million into this account so far for the project. And so moving into the construction report, I'm going to turn over to Earl Schwartz, who's
Could you
done
talk
this
a
last
little bit about
couple
that change order that's coming up?
Yeah, that'll be coming in front of the board probably maybe next board meeting or the one after.
What's the reason for that?
We're going to have them do some piping changes to make take advantage of the push-up recharge basin area at the project site, and so that is that piping package would have gone out in the future, and then it's going to be advantageous and cost-effective for us to have the current contractor do it.
It wasn't left out in the design then.
Yeah, we're adding it to the design now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Mm-hmm.
On that well, are we getting bids on those wells, or is that
Yeah.
okay? So
Yeah, there'll be a full set of design plans and specifications that'll be advertised for public bid.
okay.
Yep. Earl?
Yep. Hello.
Okay, so is it this right clicker? The right one. All right. Well, thank you, Justin. Good evening, Board of Directors, and good evening, General Manager. I have two projects to update for tonight. The first is the turnout project, turn-in project, and the second is the recharge. I did water banking recharge project. So the turn-in project, it's the slide that's on now, and Lois Construction is the general contractor. As you can see from the slide, they're completely done with all field construction. We've completed all punch list items. We're just wrapping up basically paperwork on the project at this point. So with that, the next steps are, as Justin had mentioned, we're going to be negotiating. We're going to complete the red line record drawings and the O&M binders. That activity is taking place. I should be receiving the binders on Thursday. Negotiating change orders and liquidated damage amounts. Ultimately, we'll present the change orders to the committee and board for review and approval, and ultimately then to issue a notice of completion after AVEC board approves the change orders and potential liquidated damages amount. Yeah, so the next project is the recharge project. Nicholas Construction is the general contractor. Their contract completion is in July of next year. Work is ongoing. Stage 1 pipeline was completed, and stage 1 basin spillways and concrete work was completed. We're now into stage 2 recharge basins 20 and 21, which are the northerly basins. That's ongoing. Really almost done with those. Just some piping work, just completing a little bit of levee work there. Stage 2 recharge basins 23 through 27 are the again in the north portion, but the southerly side of those basins. That work is ongoing, and then stage 2 pipeline work is ongoing actively right now. So yeah, kind of the pictures perspectives that you can see. This is looking. The picture on the left is looking towards the aqueduct, looking southwesterly, if you will, and then the picture on the right. Both of those are basins 6 and basins 4 that were with the ribbon cutting that you saw. That's those perspectives. These are taken of the stage 2 area. Basins, the slide on the left is basins 23 through 27. 23 is closest to you in the screen, and then 27 is out in the foreground. And then the picture on the right is our basins 20 and 21, and you can see the concrete spillways have been poured on both of those. Some just additional, construction activity in October. It's lateral A, so it's going from Avenue A8 is kind of the road on the southerly portion of this slide. That's east and west. That darker road area is A8, and then lateral A is the pipe construction that you can see going off northerly. So as the picture, it's looking north, and that's going out through basin 26, and it's going ultimately all the way through the Pescado Creek area out to basins 20 and 21, looking further northerly. And Nicholas Construction's been doing a great job. Just additional, slides for October. Riprap from Nicholas has been delivering riprap and aggregate base, and Wood Brothers has been placing the riprap armoring on the levee, on the levees, and that's the picture slide on the left. And then the slide on the right is Wood Brothers is the earthwork subcontractor to Nicholas, and you can see they have active large equipment doing continuing levee construction. And that's on Avenue A8, and that's looking westerly, the slide on the right. Okay, I'll go back, and the next slide is, this concludes my updates, Justin, and for this month.
Thanks, Earl.
Yeah, thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you, guys, appreciate it.
Any additional questions for Earl before we go through the last slide of this presentation? It's good to see the progress that's going on out there. They're doing really good.
Justin, at some point, it'd be nice to get those different basins, have numbers. You guys know them so well, but we don't right there.
Yeah, on the map at the beginning.
Well, on the basin, have signage right there.
Oh yeah, okay.
That's probably something you do at the end, but
Yeah. All right. Good suggestion. This is the last slide of this presentation here. Just a couple other items for updating to the board. We just like to kind of a catch-all section here. And for this meeting, I thought I'd provide just a brief Southern California Edison update. And we've talked about it, on and off as the project's gone on, but not sure that, the latest information has been passed along. But as far as the overall site power, as you've all been updated on, the Edison has to bring in a brand new 66 kV transmission line for about 10 miles from their nearest substation to the site. So that's something that we've been working with them on for the last couple of years, really. Metropolitan in their board action a few months back authorized their deposit to Southern California Edison to begin, kind of kick off the design and construction phase of that. So that $10.5 million deposit was received by us. We turned around and deposited it back to Southern California Edison. And they're working on finalizing their agreement in DocuSign. So the agreement's been finalized on paper, but they're trying to get into their electronic system to route for signatures. So we're kind of waiting on them to complete that process to sign off. As soon as that's done, then they'll be moving into design, and we will begin to heavily put some pressure on them to make sure that they meet
When
their
we pay that
schedule.
amount for construction, is there credit for electrical electricity used?
No, this is just for the construction component of the project. Yeah, for design and construction.
Yeah, are you seeing this, the 10.5? That's the total cost of the power, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the
You
Edison
say
portion.
deposit. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the full amount?
So that's the full amount of Avek / Metropolitan share for the construction of that 10-mile electrical line. The all-in cost is somewhere around 70 million, but this is that other 60 million. They call that standard facilities, meaning that they could use that line for other future customers if needed. The 10.5 million is going towards just the substation that's serving the High Desert Water Bank project site.
What substation are you taking that off?
NENAC substations, that 210th Street West and the 138.
It takes 4 years to get it there?
Yeah, to do the design, procure the poles and cable, and install it, I guess. We're going to push them, so we'll see if we can't beat that, but I don't think anybody's holding their breath.
I have a question. Does Met get paid back as people add on to the line in that 10-mile section?
No, because we're not paying for that section.
Nobody's allowed to tie into it either.
Yeah, people can tie into that portion. That's why we're not paying the $60 million of that. Does that make sense? It's a $70 million project to construct the pole line from the NENAC substation to the High Desert Water Bank site. Mm-hmm. Of that $70 million, we're only paying for the portion on the High Desert Water Bank project itself. All the pole line going from the High Desert Water Bank back to the substation, Edison is paying for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the other Edison-related item, we've talked about this briefly, I think, in the past. There's a pole line on Avenue A8 that services a Tejon Ranch well, and that's the only service on that pole line. That pole line is in the middle of some of our basins, kind of conflicting with final grading of some of the recharge basins themselves. So we've been working with Edison on a process to get that pole line removed. They're going to require a disconnect from Tejon Ranch in order to get that pole removed. So we've been talking with Tejon about how we can potentially provide them with temporary power for their well, if needed, until Edison can reconnect them through some other pathway. So that's ongoing. Just, we're still talking with them, but wanted to inform the board.
They're going to charge us to pull them poles out?
Mm-hmm. We've already paid for that.
Yeah.
So that concludes the report. Wrapping up with action items, and this is going to go right into the next presentation, but this is an item on your agenda tonight, is to consider making full progress payments to Nicholas Construction without withholding retention. So if the board is ready, we'll move right into the next
Go ahead, Justin.
item. Okay, thank you.
There's no further questions on the first item.
Okay, sounds good. So this agenda item 8C2, which is consideration and possible action on non-withholding of retention from future progress payments for Nicholas Construction. So as we just talked about, they're the contractor doing the recharge basins and pipelines. They're making good progress on the project. And they saw in our standard contract, general provisions section 7-3.2.3 for retention. Which I've got it summarized there, which says that we will withhold 5% from every progress payment that we make to them, which we always do. However, anytime after 50% of the work on the project is completed, basically the contractor can request that AVEC consider making full progress payments, meaning not withholding that additional 5%.
I personally have an issue with using our personal staff, to take away from what else we're doing. So, and plus we're working on other banks as well. So that's just my point. But anything we can do to accommodate the water master, and work with, if they work with, the staff, accommodating the staff and things like that. But I also thought, my opinion, I wasn't personally supporting the Hallmark Group at the beginning, and I was supporting somebody else that didn't get it. So, it's and another thing that needs to be brought up to the committee, you're going to have to really step on these change orders. That's one thing we do so good here at AVAC is we don't want them to lowball and come in with an extra 25-30% of change orders, and that's what really hurts the whole process. So that's my feelings on that.
Okay, anyone else from the board, any comments?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. man.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just have a question on the process. It's I know the water master works by consensus, but with the contract up, do they need 5 votes to continue a contract or to renew a contract? What happens if there's
If there's an impasse, get 2 to 3 or 4 to 1, or, we had that before. My understanding, any time we don't reach consensus, especially on something like this, I would assume that if it's the landowners who can't reach consensus, that they might hire attorneys to go to Judge Komar to try to get a change. That's the issue, that we had. It was when he chose Hallmark, it took several rounds to get to that consensus, and it was a pretty hot. Again, that's a closed session, so I can't go into that. But it took many rounds, it took many meetings. And, I'll throw out at this point, if we were to go out and hire an administrator and get officers and run a water master administration like some basins do, we'd be looking at several $100,000 like. So I know it's tough to take these changes. I know all of, including AVEC and the landowners, are paying more money for the administration. I think, Frank, you said it long ago. It was pretty unbelievable that we kept the $5 fee for as long as we did. But at this point, Hallmark, in my view, from being on the board, is doing a good job, and they're administering it well. There have been change orders, but there's been change orders that all 5 members have agreed to, necessary change orders to the contract. So I understand what some of the landowners feel. I feel for them. But again, you give me an idea how we can get 5 members to vote the way you want this to go.
It's time for me to talk.
Galen, yes, please.
Okay, it was months ago. Gary Van Dam is on the advisory committee. Several months ago, we voted 8-2 in the advisory committee to send out RFPs because we were so unhappy with the administrator. 3 of the 4 landowners voted to send out RFPs. I believe all of the water purveyors voted to send out RFPs, and the mutuals, I think John, that represents quite a few mutuals, voted to send out RFPs because we were unhappy. It's over different reasons. I mean, some of it's, a large part is expense. Some of it is their attitude towards the rest of us. We had a heck of a, the leader of our advisory committee quit because he didn't want to deal with the administrator. He wanted to get numbers on the pages, and it was just a big hassle. When that went before the Water Master Board, they didn't even question us. We said 8-2. There was no questions from the Water Master Board. we were ignored. Now we're going to have a meeting to discuss this. I know what the advisory thinks. I'm on it. You know, somebody had an idea that maybe Avek could hire one person and they could do the administrative work here, and we could pay them. We did a study on how many hours that Hallmark had put in the last 9 months. It comes up to about 26 hours a week. It's not a big job. It's not a full-time job. So thank you.
Thank you, Galen.
Thank you, Galen.
Is there anything further
Yeah,
from the board?
yeah, I support Galen and Julie on this issue. I think that, Hallmark, with all the change orders, the 6 change orders that they've had, you know, they signed up for a year contract. Never one time have they been in, you know, scope with that contract. So I think it's time for change. And I think, if AVAC shared the work with Palmdale and Quartz Hill, I think everybody could take a little piece of that and make it work.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience you're listening in? You know, one thing, you know, Matt, you're there on a every meeting right there, and Rob is. So, and again, everybody makes sense, makes a good case, but maybe just look for alternatives in something a little bit like what Galen spoke of, and just throw those items out. Maybe there's something, it could be something in between that would be better than what it is. And you, Rob, you're in that position right there, chairman of the board, but just look for what might be alternatives. It might be beneficial.
And George, I can guarantee the entire community, I've looked for alternatives and worked hard to build consensus on that board. And again, I remind everybody, it takes a 5-0 vote to take action. And so I'll leave it at that. It's not a situation where we try to, get a 3-2 or a 4-1. We have to have a 5-0 vote to change. And if you play it out, and I thought of how this could play out, but if you play it out, even if you get 4-1, it's going to go to the judge. And then who is going to pay for it to go to the judge, and what is it going to cost in attorney fees on both sides to take it to the judge? And then the way this is set up, the water master attorney would have to support whatever action the water master board took, even if it was a 4-1 vote in favor of something. We just had that play out. And that's going to cost, a lot of money to do that. So I think, and I'll certainly respond to Galen, nobody has ignored the advisory committee or ignored what they wanted. It's simply building a consensus to get the action that we are taking. And you've seen how hard we've worked for that. And I love to see you up here, Galen, so that's good.
Thank you. You know how much I love it.
I know.
If an alternative is put before the water master board, like Avek hiring a person, and we paid 100% of the full cost of that person, it might be doable. But if that's not put before the water master board, they can't consider it. So it's important that be thought of. One other thing is Hallmark is, their home base is Sacramento. And one of the landowners is Bolt House. And they and Hallmark have a relationship over in Cuyama. And they're not local either, but they farm here. So, they have a right to do what they want to do. But they always vote against us. Hallmark and Bolt House go together, hand in glove. And the other 3 landowners don't feel that way. So I think an alternative, like adding a person, might be something that should be put in front of the water master Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment? Well, Rob is correct. I've said this from the day one, since day one. And of course, I went with the flow, but I'm adamantly against, the 5-1. It has to go back or be tabled. And somebody should do an analysis of what it costs to table every time you table something. That has nothing to do with that employee. It's going to be what's going to be shared amongst the water master and the people that have the rights to use the water. So you got to figure out how to overcome that. And you brought up a good point, because if you got one person who's against everybody else, it's going to hold everything up, and then somebody's got to go have another meeting, and then that's got to go back to the attorney, and you guys are going to have to overcome this 5-0 vote.
Well, we just had a vote last time to at least start to let some things go by. Well, a situation that happened where there was an abstention and a 4 vote and an abstention, and we couldn't get consensus to do that.
You got to fix that first.
Well, it is in the judgment. So, and Frank, you and I mean, remember when they're putting that in the judgment, you and I fought really hard, but I think Avek was the only one that was opposed to a 5-0 vote. The landowners were in favor of it, the public water providers were in favor of it, and LA County was in favor of it at that time.
And I can still tell you, Rob, the landowners are in favor of that.
Of the 5-0 vote, I know.
From what they tell me, and that's why I support it, because that's my direction.
No, I think that has been said loud and clear. We work with what we have.
Our local landowners, really, we need to listen to them, and again, maybe we could do something, maybe we can't. The AVAC board, we don't always 100% agree as the water master board, but if there's alternatives, and that's what should be looked at.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, George.
But you don't want to get down the road and say, yeah, I wish I would have thought of this. So if there's something could be thought of, maybe more agreeable, I think that would be a good task for the board to try to come up with any alternatives that would be acceptable.
So, and the Kyles have brought up an alternative that we haven't put before them. And is it the consensus of this board that alternative is something that should be brought up? I mean, it's not on the agenda, so maybe that needs to be put on the agenda, but I'm not sure we would get a consensus vote on that recommendation.
I mean, that's a good point, Well, but in your position as chairman, I'm not sure if you'll have to agree at this meeting, but you can talk about that.
No, of course. I look at every potential option.
I think that's all we could ask.
I completely agree with the Kyles that when AVAC and Palmdale were administering this, it ran really well, and it ran at a price that was incredibly reasonable. And I agree with Matt, it was subsidized somewhat by us, somewhat by Palmdale, but it did run really well. But then, it came to a point where we looked for other options, and then we had to get consensus to get the other options.
But regardless, maybe I did subsidize it, I'm sure we did, but still, Hallmark put a bid in, and they put many change orders in. I don't know how professional that is.
Well, I know how you feel about change orders, and I think you kind of taught me to feel the same way. But again, we looked at each one of the change orders, and to approve any change order, it took a 5-0 vote.
Yeah.
So, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's all been good discussion, and we hear the comments from the Kyles. I think we can give it some thought. If there's something that I can work with Rob, if there's something we think is appropriate to put on the agenda, and with George, we can put on our next meeting's agenda and discuss it. We've kind of drifted a little bit off from the public comment period. being that this is non-agendized. So,
All good comments, so I think
Yeah.
we'll move on. Is there anybody else? Galen?
Let's just make one more.
and just so you know, Galen, we do have Jennifer here, and she's got a flight to catch later, so we want to try to keep it moving.
I just want to point out, when you say the Kyles, it's way more than the Kyles. I said it was an 8-2 vote, and it was water purveyors and farmers, and it was mutuals. It's not just us. And we had a meeting at the Farm Bureau with Russ Bryden and Kathy McLaren, and they were to see all the different people that call us and tell us that they're unhappy. And so they got a true taste of, it's not just the Kyles. And Angel could do this job on the weekends.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
President Lane, can I make a suggestion? Just because Jennifer has a flight to catch later, can we rearrange the agenda and
Definitely.
skip to item 8A1?
Would you care to introduce them?
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, Jennifer. So Jennifer Pierre is here. She is the general manager for the State Water Contractors Association. Avek has been a member of the association for many years, and she works very closely with all the representatives from the State Water Contractors. I don't know, there's 26 or 27 that are members of the association. So we invited her down this evening to give a presentation on what they're working on and what's coming up over the next year or so. So take it away, Jennifer.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I recognize a few of you from last time I was here, which I'm 2018, 19, it's quite a while ago. Anyway, first, before I get started, I just want to say that it's been really fascinating to watch this wet year and to watch especially Avek really do a lot of really creative things. And I just want to commend the board for your leadership around some of the groundwater banking and what you've been doing. It's been incredible to watch, and it's I like to brag about it. So thanks for doing that work. So I don't think I have a clicker, so I'll just say next slide. So this map is showing the service area of the State Water Project. I'll just give an overview of kind of who we are and what we're up to. We are a nonprofit. We have a membership open to all our members or all of the contractors, and there's 29 contractors, which are agencies that contract with the Department of Water Resources for State Water Project Water. And 27 of those contractors are members of my organization, and we represent legal, regulatory, science, policy issues that impact the State Water Project. There are 9 members of our board, and 2 of them come from the East Branch, and currently Avek represents one of those board seats. Peter does. We coordinate across all of our members, and we try to make sure we're all on the same page. Now, that's not always possible, but as it relates to the State Water Project, we tend to really stay on the same page, and that really helps us amplify the position of the contractors as it relates to what's needed on the State Water Project in terms of water supply and affordability. Next slide. Overall, the State Water Project serves 27 million Californians, but I like to say 1 in 12 Americans. And we also serve water. Yeah, it's a big number. And 750,000 acres of productive farmland. Most of that is in Kern County, Kings County, et cetera. But every county and all of our service area, there's ag everywhere. So, that's an important piece. All of you ratepayers in the state have invested about $30 billion since the inception of the State Water Project. So it's really an asset that's had a lot of investment over the last 50 years, 60 years, and something that we want to protect in terms of making sure it remains affordable and that it's delivering water supply to our members. Next slide. So with this is our mission. I'm not going to read it to you, but the bottom line is we're trying to figure out how to retain water supply reliability at the cheapest possible cost. So that's the bottom line. The next slide. We have a staff of 9 people. We're really small. We're a tiny little organization. Each of us has a different area of focus. Like I have a science manager and an infrastructure manager and a hydrologist and someone that does billing. And we each have our own little thing we do and coordinate across those topics to try to connect the dots. We are always seeking consensus across our board. I don't recall that we've had any votes in the last 6.5 years where we didn't have consensus. And again, I think that just speaks to everybody sharing the common goal of making the State Water Project work from a supply perspective and an affordability perspective.
When you say that, is that with the State Water Contractors?
Correct. Our board of 9, yeah.
That's not good. It really isn't.
Well,
I'm not
there's certain things that we agree not to bring up and we decide that like people will split off, for example, and take separate positions if it's not unanimous. But the way our bylaws are written is that I'm not going to go represent, for example, Metropolitan on something that the rest of the contractors don't agree on. So that's, because I'm working at the direction of all of our members.
The AVEC board, most things we're unanimous on, but some we are not.
Mhm.
We can have big disagreements, and one set vote's taken, it's over,
Right.
We're back to.
Yeah.
There's no animosity.
No, we don't have any animosity, but sometimes people have to take, they'll create their own little coalition on a particular topic to protect their own interests on the project. We work with DWR. We're at the director level all the way down to the field division level. We have really good relationships. All of our staff do, along with many of our contractors and Peter and others that spend time in Sacramento. We have really good relationships with them. We work with the governor's office, Department of Fish and Wildlife, all the regulatory agencies, the state water board. So we just are in Sacramento, really making sure that our perspective is known and represented no matter what the topic is related to the state water project. Next slide.
Okay, can I ask you
Yeah,
a question?
sure.
Yeah. You said that you work with all those different agencies. Like what? I mean, you mean to potentially maybe challenge some of the ideas they have? Or?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, we have a lot of common interest agreements with these agencies that help us work with them on like what will a permit application look like? Or, for example, in the development of the voluntary agreement, we worked with state board staff and the governor's office to put together, that proposal. So we work with them in all sorts of ways. I'm going to be speaking at the state board on Friday, along with a number of other public water agencies. So in all of the different forums, whether it be more one-on-one to more public forums, we are engaging with them in whatever the different avenues are to engage.
So what about like the proposed? We're trying to slip into the tunnel again, and are you guys on top of that?
Equipped to set them up to where we can exercise them
Right.
even before we have the outside power.
Let the board know again what our concerns were, Matt, with that.
Yeah, I think it was at the committee level, or maybe it was at the board meeting. The question was brought up if, those wells have louvers and the casing as they sit for years or months at a time without being exercised. There's a concern that those louvers will get corrosion and build up on them without.
Right. Okay.
So the thought is if we exercise them regularly, we'll keep those clear.
Right.
Yeah.
Pump a lot more water.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good point. Probably nobody on the board understands it more than Gary does, so that was great. Okay, thank you, Justin.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jeff.
I'm going to stay up here because I'm on the next item.
Okay, Matt, we're going to officially turn it over to you.
Let's see. The next item is the Water Projects Committee.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
I was getting down to number 9.
No,
The
that's
Water
okay.
Projects Committee, 8D1, acceptance of the warranty deed. And we'll start off with Director Miller right there.
Yeah.
We did have our committee meeting, and I'll turn this over to Justin or Matt.
Yeah, actually, Justin.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Director Miller. So in your board packet, there's a staff report for this item. The warranty deed that we'll be discussing, I think, is also included in your board packet. And so this item is related to the improvements recently made by Los Angeles County Waterworks at their 60th Street West and Avenue L12 turnout just down the street from the Quartz Water Treatment Plant here.
Used to be the Twin Tunnel. What do they call them now?
Delta Conveyance Project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They changed the name, so
Yeah.
it's covered up. So who are you guys directly involved with that?
We are directly involved in that. So 18 of our members are providing funding for planning. And so at some point, you and all of the 17 others that had provided funding for planning will have to take a look at the information provided and make a decision on whether or not you're going to participate. In the meantime, the contractors do engage with the Department of Water Resources to make sure that that project is being evaluated and proposed in a way that would make the most sense for the state water project.
I had heard everybody was contributing. Was it 18? Is several of them not contributing then?
There's 5 north of Delta contractors that aren't participating because they wouldn't receive any benefits from the project. And then there's a couple smaller ag agencies and the Central Coast Water Authority who are not participating yet.
And we're going to know what type of funding mechanism they're gonna try to utilize to pay for this thing?
Right. So at some point when your staff is ready, they'll come back to you with a host of information that I don't have available tonight.
Now, we, as one of 27, we have a voice when it comes to that vote, correct?
Each agency will have its own vote on whether or not to participate.
Because that's gonna be a very costly project. And that, it's either gonna go through the water rate or potentially maybe a property tax situation. So it's gonna be one of the two. I know they're not gonna be selling raffle tickets. So, so I just wanna make sure, and also as directors, and our staff, is there a way with a link to have access to the Zoom meetings instead of actually attending it?
What meeting are you referring to?
The board meetings.
My board meeting?
Yeah,
Our board meetings are available.
They are on Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Most people attend in person or Zoom.
Both. I think a combination.
The question is, do most people attend in person or Zoom?
It's both. It's about half and half.
Half and half?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question. Are the farmers in support of the tunnel?
Kern County Water Agency is currently one of the agencies providing planning funding, but again, no one's making a decision yet on the project. Right now, the department is evaluating the project and is going to provide additional information for each of the boards to consider whether or not they participate in the project moving forward. Okay, so I like to show this slide because this really, to me, is the driver on everything the state water contractors are doing. I'm showing you on the left a slide that's showing a very dry year. We have this stair-step pattern. We had rain, no rain, rain, no rain. Then we had last year, still same pattern. The steps are steeper, but this is what we have to be able to respond to in the State Water Project Delta system, is the fact that we are going to get slugs of water all at once, and then not a lot of water. And that's even happening in the wet year. In 2023, we had a lot of water in January, dried out in February, a lot of water in March, and you can see that. So all of this is kind of like my North Star is, how do you react to this and how do you respond to this and how do you maximize your water supply in an affordable way to respond to this stair step? And that's kind of the driver, North Star on all the things that we do. So the next I'm going to talk about our different objectives and just run through really briefly the areas of focus in my organization and the things that we're working on and what things we've accomplished. So moving on to business practices, we are really focused on affordability. We're working closely with the Department of Water Resources to make sure that their budgeting process and how they issue statement of charges to each of you is aligned and is prioritizing appropriately asset management and how they're looking at different risks on different facilities. Of course, this is a 60-year-old facility, so there is a lot of ongoing maintenance always occurring, but obviously there's an affordability issue that needs to come into play, and we work very closely with the department on identifying different reaches and what should be done. And we don't have necessarily a say, but we could provide input on what's affordable and provide that input on, what could be sustained within the rate structures. We've been implementing the contract extension. That was a really big deal for all of you to sign the contract extension. We've had some very positive outcomes in our litigation on that and expect to move into that contract implementation in the next couple of years. And we're also working to identify the public benefits of the State Water Project. And the reason for that is that right now, water ratepayers pay the vast majority of the cost of the State Water Project. And that made sense when the main purpose of the project is water supply, but we're really asking the State Water Project to do a lot more. And so we're working on identifying what are those benefits, how do we better spread the cost to those who benefit.
Why versus the state water contractors versus all of California?
Well, for example, when the Amber Alert went out last year for, I guess that was 2 years ago, for turning off your lights, and we didn't have the rolling blackouts, but they were potentially imminent. The State Water Project was reoperated to keep the grid on, and it didn't impact your water supply, delivery, or anything. But it was a benefit that was in receipt by the entire state. So we want to look at those sorts of things and start to identify cost sharing.
That didn't answer the question. If it's a benefit to the entire state,
correct,
why isn't the entire state looking at sharing these costs?
That's exactly what we're trying to do. identify them and then seek cost share.
In all these years, it hasn't been done yet.
Correct. But I also think it's very recent that
We're paying, I don't know how much a year. What is the budget for the state water contract?
my organization
Yeah.
is roughly $10 million.
Yeah. And AVEC, we don't pay anywhere near that, but we pay a sizable amount. And your answer, just working on that, I mean, that should have been done years ago, if not decades ago.
Moving on to the next slide. Energy. This is an area we are committed to 100% renewable. We're a pretty green facility. We're at 70% right now, but we have about 15 years to get to 100%. So we are actively working with the governor's office, the legislature, and the Department of Water Resources, again, to identify where there's cost share opportunities for, again, benefits to the state and the overall grid versus just benefits to the state water project, articulating that and making sure that we're making this transition as affordable and cost effective as possible. This is one of the fastest growing costs. And the farther down you are, the more you pay. So I'm sure you feel that. And this is a huge area of focus for us. I think we've got a lot of traction within the legislature and the governor's office about helping us address these costs. And we've got a lot of studies that are ongoing that are coming to completion that will really guide us on how to make these investments in the most cost-effective way. So that's really where our energy focus is right now. There's relicensing activities going on. We still don't have a license, but the Southern California relicensing seems to be on track. Next slide. In terms of infrastructure, again, we're tracking asset management. This is really critical. We want to make sure the facilities continue to function, but we also want to make sure that we're maintaining them in an affordable way. We're still continuing to pursue aqueduct subsidence repairs. They do have a limitation when we have really wet years. And we're working on, we have a coalition that works on getting public dollars to help cost share in those repairs. And we actively work with our water partners throughout the state for that. We've so far received about $200 million from the state, a little bit more challenging on the federal side. But I think, again, doing that study that shows the benefits of this repair beyond the water users is another area where we can start to demonstrate the rationale for public dollars. We have dam safety issues. We've got a number of projects. One, of course, is the SysDam retrofit seismic share. DWR successfully negotiated last month, I believe it was, after about a year and a half of negotiations, a cost share agreement with the Bureau on that, and that saves the state contractors about $500 million. So we're pretty pleased with the outcome of that agreement. And then we're also working on storage investigations. I think it's clear, and you guys are ahead of the game, that storage is really critical, and that when these big wet years happen, it makes sense to have some space in the ground or above ground. And I think collectively the contractors are really taking another look at this, where I think before it was maybe a little bit more back burner. So I think that's a smart way to go, and we're facilitating those discussions. Next slide. We do a lot of education and outreach. I was speaking this morning. I was speaking on Friday. We are all over the place. We have legislative briefings. We meet with legislators. We I don't really say no to any speaking engagement. I feel like I'm always out there really trying to share our perspective. There's a lot of dialogue going on about what people think water policy should look like, what we should do. And it's been really important for us to be out there talking about our perspective and what's protective of the state water project, what works and what doesn't work. And we try to do that in a collaborative way. And I think that does give us a seat at the table in a lot of ways. Another thing we do has to do with science, which I'll talk about late in a minute, but science is also another entry point into a number of dialogues that impact directly our water supply and the permits that get issued for it. So there's always legislation that is potentially negatively impacting the state water project. We are there to protect the state water project. We coordinate not only with our lobbyists, but we coordinate across all of the contractors' lobbyists to really make sure we're in a unified voice in the Capitol. And we've been very successful in making sure certain bills that are very detrimental go away, or modifying them, or advancing other bills like design build bills that really are helpful to the state water project. So we work as a group in that way.
Did I hear that right? The budget's $40 million. Your budget?
My budget is 10.
10 million.
Yeah. I don't know what I would do with $40 million. I think we're pretty good. We have a science program as part of the state water contractors. This has been really critical. We have been able to directly affect the type of regulation on the system through the science that we've invested in. The FOLX 2 provision, which was the most controversial provision of the 2008 biological opinion, has been substantially modified in 2019 and 2020, and in the permit applications we just saw come out last week. We've been able to put boats in the water immediately to counter some of the kind of criteria that were kind of blindly put in the permits to try to allow for more nimble operations when we saw these wet years. So it's been a really good investment. I can go on and on about direct benefits that we've accrued to the water supply because of our ability to step in and supplement the science that's being done by state and federal agencies in a way that is directly answering management questions and influencing how the project is operated. Okay, next slide. On water supply, it's listed here last because it starts with a W, but it's certainly our most important objective. We are working on the reconsultation under Endangered Species Act. The permit application or biological assessment was just released last Friday, I believe, and we are actively involved in that process. We'll be making comments. We've been making comments. We similarly with the State Endangered Species Act permit, again, just really pushing on what's the right science, what makes sense, what's justified in terms of operations, and making sure it works for the state water project. We're hopeful that the implementation of the voluntary agreement will actually resolve the litigation issues, and so far all of these pieces appear to be coming together, so we're very excited about the potential to really stabilize the regulatory environment within the Delta. And then, like I mentioned before, we are working on Delta conveyance, and that's, again, will be a decision each board will make at the appropriate time. But in the meantime, we are supporting the planning. We track hydrology. We're on top of water operations. If you go to our website, we have what's called a Delta dashboard. We're showing you all of the different hydrology, what the different drivers are, what the constraints are in the Delta, who's pumping what. So really trying to not just inform the public, but all of our members, and also highlight where there's opportunities to perhaps make adjustments, and coordinating that with the agencies. If we see something like, could we think about it this way? We engage in a lot of water rights proceedings. There's all sorts of people constantly petitioning the State Water Board, and we are there to protect the water right of the State Water Project all the time. And then we also coordinate transfers and exchanges through the dry year transfer program, but also just keeping everybody informed about what everybody else is doing. So there's a lot always going on with the water supply piece, and that's, I would say my primary focus, and then I have my assistant general manager, Chandra Chimla-Curry, this is his primary focus as well. So in terms of things we've accomplished in the last, 12 months or so, the voluntary agreement is huge. It's protecting several 100,000 acre-feet of supply for the State Water Project, while also implementing a program that we think will actually make improvements to the environment so that we can take that pressure off the systems. We've got better permits than we've ever had before. I mentioned we saved $500 million. That was a hard negotiation. Kudos to the Department of Water Resources for making that happen. That otherwise would have landed on our bills. We expect that there'll be a final EIR on Delta conveyance very soon, and that will again be one of the pieces of information you'll need to make a decision. We've saved the contractors over $2 billion in energy transition costs through amendments we were able to get on a bill last year. We're implementing the energy roadmap, which I didn't specifically mention, but that is the policy by which we are going to make this transition, and we don't want to be told how to do it. We want to say how we're going to do it in a way that makes sense for us and is affordable. Again, the storage investigations are huge. We've had successful litigation outcomes on the contract extension, legislative briefings, water rights things, and also just helping with getting the financial management of the State Water Project at DWR more and more tidied up in a way that I think saves us money and is better aligning with your ability to plan for the cost of the State Water Project.
Is there any state water agencies that don't participate? They do it on their own, like Met or Kern County? They have their own staff?
Right. So Metropolitan, Kern County Water Agency, and Santa Clara Valley Water District all have staff in Sacramento, actually in the same building as us. And so they tend to, engage at a more intensive level than other agencies that don't have staff in Sacramento. But we all still, work together. So,
But Jennifer, those agencies you mentioned still fund the state water contractors.
oh yeah, definitely.
So.
Yeah. I think when I looked at Met's last 5 years, I think it's about 44% of our dues. So it's generally tied to table A, but there's also variations associated with energy and other factors that come into play. Okay. So moving forward for us, we're going to continue to work on the financial tracking and management. This is a really critical thing. I think there's been some agencies that historically have been very cost sensitive and others that have been less so. And what I'm finding is that everybody is cost sensitive now. Everybody's being asked to do more with less. And that's just a theme that's going to run through all of the contractors and therefore all, everything that I do. We've got to resolve the litigation in the Delta. And I think we're very close. We've got the, this is like key, like code word, SB 49 and energy roadmap. But this is really how do we get to 100% and how do we do it in an affordable way that does not disrupt water supply? Water supply has got to continue to be the primary function of the state water project. We're going to continue to do our science because, again, it continues to provide benefits for us and our operations. And it also provides benefits of us having a seat at the table in important dialogues that are occurring all the time. We're going to continue to support Delta conveyance planning so that you guys will have the information you need to make a decision. The storage I mentioned and our outreach is just really, really critical. Otherwise, there's a vacuum and there's a lot of other perspectives out there. And that's it for my presentation tonight.
Any questions from the board?
I just had a comment, Jennifer.
Yeah.
This is the third time I've seen you present. You do a terrific job representing us. And I just want to thank you for the information you provide to us and all the public. So
Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Jennifer, you mentioned this numerous ways the state water contractors saves money to the state water agencies. You're an oversight, but who's an oversight to your organization? If the board went 6.5 years, never had a split vote, who watches the budget? $10 million for 9 employees.
Every month in our board packet, we provide a budget update with information on what's been spent in each fund, and that's available to you to take a look at.
But you've got a board that's never, is it 6.5 years, been unanimous?
Well, like I said, when there's a disagreement, what happens is I have to step out because my job is to represent the entirety of everybody's position. And when there's a disagreement, I extract myself from that so that I'm not choosing sides, and contractors can then opt to represent their specific perspective on their own.
But there's always been a unanimous vote.
Right, because if there's not unanimity, they will take that outside of my organization.
George, we have Peter's one of the board members there that is involved in that process, and he represents the East Branch, but also us, and so he might be a good one to ask about that.
I understand, but my comments, I've been involved in a lot of boards. I've never seen a board unanimous for 6.5 years. Something is wrong if people vote unanimous for 6.5 years.
Georgia Watermaster Board, all but one.
You're going to fix that wrong. Okay.
All right.
But again, it's a heck of a budget. Yeah, I don't know. Is anybody? Do we get a copy of the budget?
We do. Correct.
Could the board get a copy?
Yeah, we can start providing that to the board.
But it's numerous projects. Talks about what they're doing to save money. But what are we doing to save money to an organization? We don't have any comment. We don't do anything. All these items are good, but everything costs money, and that's a lot of these. I'll carry a little further, but all these bond issues, they're all good, but somebody's got to pay them.
Right.
Just like anyway, that's.
Well, I'm proud that in the last, I would say 3 to 4 years, our budget's been at pretty much the exact same. So we aren't increasing year over year, even as we've had to deal with cost of living issues and the increased complexity of the issues we're dealing with. So I'm proud of, the fact that we've been able to stabilize dues for our members and provide what I think is increasing service.
Well, good. But this board's here to represent the taxpayers and the water users. And so if we don't do that, we're not doing our duties.
Yep.
And so we appreciate you coming, and some of these maybe are not easy questions, but we have them.
No problem.
And anyway, Matt, you're gonna give a copy of the budget to the board.
Yeah, we can do that. No
Is there
problem.
anything else? Anybody, the board members or the audience?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice, even though I'm trying to catch the last flight out so I can get home into my board meeting tomorrow. It's really nice to be in the service area. And I really appreciate the invitation here. It's really helpful to see it and to see all your faces. And I appreciate you having me here tonight.
Thank you
for
again.
coming.
Drive carefully.
Good job.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move back a little bit. Item number 6, adoption of an agenda. Board order 6A1, we have 4 items. If there's no questions on those, a motion be in order.
President, I'll move on item 6 to adopt the agenda.
Okay, Dr.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then we need a roll call vote.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Move on, item number 7, consent calendar. I got a little ahead of myself, but we have 4 items on there. One of them is we're going to, our board meeting is September 12th. The other 3 are with the county tax sharing, and we can't do much about those. If there's any questions from staff, if not, any questions, all in favor? We need a motion.
Director Mercy so moves.
Van Dam, second.
Dr. Mercy and Dr. Van Dam. Is there anything further, Madam Secretary?
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Motion carried.
Aerial image here, they've got some remnants of a pump station that looked like they began to construct it at one point and kind of abandon it for the moment. So there's plans to complete that at some point in the future. So in order to feed that, they wanted to come off of our line with a new 36-inch line. And right now that's blind flanged to be able to future connect to this pump station.
And we'll move on to 8B1 Finance Committee. And that's Director Donato is chairman of that. Turn it over to
Yeah,
Director
okay.
Donato.
Yeah, Finance Committee, last week on Thursday, and went through several agenda items here, and the first one is 8B1. Consider impossible action to accept and file the check registry for the period of October 12th through November 1st, 2023.
You can take a minute to review that. Page 41. The Finance Committee has already reviewed it in detail. If anybody would like more time, that's fine, but otherwise a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve Board Order 8B1.
We have a motion, need a second?
I'll second.
Director Miller is a second. Is there any further discussion? Madam Secretary, we can have a roll call.
That's on our side of the meter is our responsibility. So what the warranty deed does is it transfers officially those improvements over to AVAC permanently. So our legal counsel, Jim Markman specifically, reviewed that warranty deed and bill of sale that's included within your packet and recommends that this is the appropriate process to accept and record that warranty deed and bill of sale. So in addition to transferring those improvements, it also provides a 1-year warranty on those improvements for the benefit of AVAC for the next year. So as Director Miller mentioned, we discussed this with the Water Projects Committee, and the Water Projects Committee and staff both recommend that the board accept and record the warranty deed and bill of sale for these improvements.
Are you okay with that?
Yes. If there's no questions, I'll move.
Yeah.
I'll move.
We have a motion by Director Miller. We need a second.
I'll second that motion.
Director Paris. There's no further no further discussion. Madam Secretary.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Drew Mercy,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes, motion carried. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay,
Justin.
Matt, now we'll move on
Ready,
to
huh? All right.
item number 9, general manager report.
All right. It's pretty brief this evening, but we're going to start handing it over to Peter Thompson. We have a state water project committee that meets once a month. Directors Van Dam, Lane, and Miller. Did I get that right? Yes. So we meet monthly. And one thing they ask for is each month for Peter to provide an update of what's being discussed at the state water contractor meetings on a monthly basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pete. He's got just a couple slides here.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Good evening, directors. So just hitting the highlights of the board agenda in October. And we had a presentation from Coachella Valley. So occasionally contractors get up and we'll talk about what their situation is with respect to the state water project. Coachella Valley, it was their turn this time. They're fairly unique in that they're on the East Branch, they're a state water project contractor, but they don't receive any state water project water. Because of an agreement with Metropolitan Water District, they decided not to finish the East Branch down to Coachella, and instead, Metropolitan receives their state water project water, and in exchange, Coachella Water Agency gets Colorado River water that Met has rights to. So it's an interesting way in which Metropolitan and that East Branch contractor work together. Just one of the highlights I wanted to point out there. There was only one board action item in October, and that was to approve $30,000 for funding the voluntary agreement support. That was budgeted, and that budget was developed in February of last year, and that was approved by the full board. That funding goes to support those efforts into doing that voluntary agreement. The voluntary agreements are important because that helps resolve litigation for us, provides some certainty as far as regulations go, and reduces costs significantly by blowing away all the litigation that's going on within the Delta regarding our water movement. So that's why we approved that $30,000. Also discussed at that October meeting was something that was brought up at a finance committee meeting back here in September. We highlighted that the statement of charges for 2024 was revised and reduced. So Avek's cost projected for 2024 is going to be about $1 million less than when they initially sent it out. The question was brought up, why is that? Why the change? What happened? So we talked about that with the committee.
A million less for what?
$1 million less for our fixed costs on the state water contract. And that has to do with DWR has to start building their estimate at the beginning of the year, and they roll in some guesses in terms of what the allocation is going to be. Normally they do 60%, but following on the heels of a 20%, a 5%, and a 5%, they felt like 60% was too much to give as an estimate. So they made it 35%. Well, then we had a 100% year. So that really messed up their calculations initially. So they had to go back and revise it a month later, fix it. And that's why we have that reduced statement of charges for 2024. Then the other thing we went over was kind of an outlook for 23-24 water year. It started October 1st. It's a drier than average start, but you never know what's going to happen. Could have a really wet spring and winter. We do have a strong El Nino condition. There's a lot being made of that in the media right now, but one of the things we drove home is that it pretty much is even odds for whether or not you get a dry or wet year in Northern California. There's higher odds that you're going to have a above average year in Southern California for water. but that really doesn't impact our state water project allocation very much. So, so we're not, it really remains, there's a lot being made of the like great snow that's going to potentially come because of El Nino, but that isn't as much of a certainty as the media is making it sound. Then we do, because we're seeing like drafting in the Oroville and San Luis reservoirs, we anticipate that in December, when they make the first allocation, it'll be conservative and low. So if we roll out with a 5 or 10% in December, I would not be surprised at this thing. So that's my update for the State Water Project Committee. I don't know if George or Audrey or Gary, if you wanted to add anything from.
I just can't fathom for 6.5 years having any unanimous votes. If you have what? How many contractors are usually up there? 29 or is there?
Yeah, and so I'd be happy to talk about that more with you, George. There's some different dynamics. So it's not a Brown Act board. So there's a lot of discussion that goes on between the members when there is a disagreement on how things are going to go forward. We've had them recently. There's 2 projects that the state water contractors, Jennifer proposed that we put in a protest letter to get a seat at the table for state water contractors on sites and the Sisk dam raise.
But this unanimous vote, that's between the state water contractors.
It's the same state water contractors. What I'm trying to say is there is disagreement, but a lot of times in those situations, what happens is that whoever's representing the agency that disagrees will they'll all agree that they're going to like, okay, this group of contractors is going to sign a letter in protest. This group will sign their letter opposing that protest.
Well, I guarantee you, if we send a couple of AVAC directors up there, that wouldn't go 6.5 years.
That's probably true. I guarantee you that's true too. But it is a different dynamic. And I'm happy, and it hasn't been actually unanimous the whole time, but there's generally consensus.
Yeah. But that's, again, I'll reiterate that is not healthy for a board for 6.5 years. Somebody's not doing their job.
Point taken.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Pete. So, this is, we've all seen this chart. It's the blue bars or the darker blue bars. That's the average for each of the months. So you can see water year starts in October. So for the month of October, average is 2.8 inches, and we received just less than 1 inch as actual. For November, average is 5.3. We're off to a slow start at just under 1 inch for November today. We talked earlier this year about the risk of San Luis spilling before the end of the year. The likelihood of that is dropping. So you'll see it, I think it's in our next slide. What our plan is for the water supplies available to Avek. Our customer demands are going to hit right about 40,000 acre feet of state water project supplies. We're going to meet a little bit more than that with some groundwater that we're pumping just to keep the pipes circulated and water moving it from the West Side Water Bank. We're on target to recharge about 65,000 acre feet this year between all the sites. We've recharged about 55,000 acre feet through the end of October, so we'll easily hit that 65,000 mark by the end of December. We've accomplished, or it looks like they're all on track, about 52,000 acre feet of transfers that we've all approved. So that's good news for the agency. You'll see over the next month or two some transfers of groundwater rights being transferred to AVAC as part of those transfers. It's carryover that parties had where we exchanged state water project supply for their carryover. So those will be going before the water master here over the next month or two. And then our estimated carryover into 2024 is actually going to increase slightly. We were targeting about 20,000 acre feet. but it looks like we'll have about 25,000 acre feet of carryover to start out next year's water supply. So all good news there. Big accomplishment to all the staff from operating the recharge facilities and Tom Barnes working on the transfers. You can see we've put together or put to use
Recording in progress.
I think the meeting's gone too long. It's out. Thank you. If you could scroll down there.
Right here.
Probably that last, right?
This one. That's
Yeah, there we go. Last slide. So, a couple of upcoming events for the agency. We have an infrastructure LA meeting tomorrow. That's Justin and I are going to attend that meeting. And it's a group that was established to look at grant funding for water and sewer facilities. So, we're going to represent AVAC at that meeting and see if we can learn anything about some grant opportunities for AVAC. We have a Thanksgiving holiday late next week. Just a reminder, we have the special board meeting and workshop on Monday, the 27th, to go through the annual audit. Brandon with the ED and Payne, who performed the audit, will be here in person for that. The Aqua Conference is the following week after Thanksgiving, and I will be attending that. So the next board meeting, Peter's going to cover that for me. I'll be able to call in remotely, but he'll be here in person. And then obviously we have the Water Master meeting on December 5th here at AVAC. So that's all I have, Director Lane. Unless you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any questions from the general manager or comments? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 10, director's reports. Is there any anything they'd like to report?
Mr. President, I just want to say I went to the State of the City of Lancaster presentation this last Wednesday. It was set up really nicely. They had like a taste of the valley at the very beginning with the restaurants having things to taste. And then we went into the room and we got to hear from the, Mayor Paris and all the different things that are happening with the city of Lancaster. I'll have to say the police department that is starting up in Lancaster seems like it's a community. It's going to work with the sheriff's department more on the community side, do more neighborhood watch and whatnot. And so it's good to see the I don't know, the hydrogen was introduced that the city wants to do. And there's a lot of things happening in the city of Lancaster which will affect all of us in the valley, and it's good to see the growth
Great.
there.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. I would have liked to have went, it just didn't work out, but I'm sure it sounds like it was very worthwhile.
They may have a video online.
Okay, is there anything further? Is that okay? We'll move on to attorney's reports.
Nothing to report, President.
Okay, thank you. Request for future agenda items. Okay, Matt, we do have a need for a closed session.
We do for item A.
Okay.
Yep.
We could,
I can do it now.
Yeah, and Director Mercy has to recuse himself.
I'll be recused as one of the parties of a financial conflict.
okay, great.
I'll
So
be
maybe
out
we'll
here.
take a 5-minute break and,
Yeah. And we'll meet in the back,
you
and then we'll get Keith transferred over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Things already.
Okay, good.